I felt the shove before I heard the scream. The world tilted, rocks tore across my arms, and then silence. My own son had pushed me off a cliff. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe so you won't miss the story that might brighten your day, even when it starts in the darkest place. My name is Helen Ellison, and I am 62 years old. What I'm about to share with you will forever change the way you see your own family. Because 3 days ago, on a trail high in the mountains, my own son tried to kill me. It was supposed to be a celebration. Thomas, my husband of 40 years, and I had agreed to let Jude, our youngest son, and his wife Raina take us on a special anniversary hike. They promised us fresh air, photos with a view, a memory worth keeping. Instead, they gave us Betrayal carved into stone. The trail had narrowed as we climbed. The valley yawned wide beneath us, stitched by a silver river. The kind of sight that makes you forget your breath. Raina held up her phone, her smile warm and rehearsed. "Just one more picture, Mom. Step back a little. The valley will frame you perfectly." Thomas's hand tightened around mine, our secret language since the children were small. He didn't need words. That squeeze said, "Be careful." But before I could move, before I could even think, I felt it. The shove, the world tilted. The sky spun upside down. Branches tore across my arms as my body scraped down jagged rock. Pain burst like white fire inside me until the ground finally rose to meet me with a crack so loud it stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream, but I was alive. And then through the haze I heard Thomas's voice, broken and urgent. "Don't move, Helen, play dead." So I did. I forced my body to go slack, forced my chest to rise so shallow no one would see. I became a corpse in rehearsal. Above us, boots scuffed against loose stone. "They're not breathing, Jude." Raina's voice floated down, sharp and stripped of sweetness. "Good," Jude hissed, then softer, dripping with the grief he thought others would believe. "I mean God, Mom, Dad." My heart slammed against my ribs, my own son, my own blood. And then came the words that broke what was left of me. "It worked," Raina whispered. "It looks just like an accident." Jude's voice shook, not from guilt, but from the weight of desperation. "I had no choice, Raina. The debts, the loans, I'm drowning. This was the only way. And the inheritance." She pressed. "It's ours now," he said flatly. "Everything they saved, everything they worked for, finally ours." Their voices drifted higher as they scrambled back toward the trailhead, rehearsing sorrow for an audience they hadn't even met yet. But I had heard enough. Lying there with blood in my mouth and gravel biting into my back, my life began replaying itself. Not as a movie of joy, but as a riddle I had refused to solve. I thought of our home, the oak table Thomas carved by hand, the porch where we used to drink coffee and watch the sky melt into night. I thought of the children we had raised in that house. Caleb, our firstborn, with laughter like sunlight, always helping his father in the shop, always watching out for me. And Jude, my younger boy, quieter, always hanging back in the shadows of his brother. I had loved them equally, or at least I had told myself I did. We had been the family everyone admired on Sundays, neighbors joining us for barbecues, sisters bringing their kids to run in our yard. Thomas's carpentry, my teaching at the elementary school, Caleb's big dreams, Jude's silence. It all seemed ordinary, safe, but happiness has a way of hiding shadows. And ours was hidden 25 years ago, the night Caleb died. They told us it was an accident, that he stumbled into the gorge in the dark. We buried him under a heavy sky, and I clung to that explanation because the alternative was too unbearable. But now, lying broken at the bottom of another gorge, I knew the truth. This betrayal didn't start today. It didn't start with the push that nearly killed me. It started the night Caleb never came home. The pain was blinding, but a colder realization numbed me more than the broken bones ever could. For 25 years, I had been living with a stranger. I thought I lost one son that night. I whisper to you now, to the only witness I may ever have. But the truth was far worse. I lost them both. Caleb to the gorge and Jude to the darkness that took his place. As the sirens began to echo faintly in the valley and my body was lifted onto a stretcher, one thought burned hotter than all the pain combined. This wasn't just about survival. This was about unearthing the truth that had been buried with my firstborn. The betrayal wasn't finished. It was just beginning. The whir of helicopter blades beat above me, thundering against the mountain walls as rescuers lowered themselves down the cliff face. Hands checked my pulse, voices barked orders I could barely make sense of. A medic's breath smelled faintly of mint as he leaned close and whispered, "She's still with us. Still with us." Those 3 words dug deeper than the pain in my ribs, because Jude and Raina believed I was gone. They had written me off as nothing more than an obstacle removed. They were wrong. The world blurred in and out during the flight to St. Elora Medical Center. My husband Thomas lay strapped to a stretcher beside me, his face pale, his chest rising shallowly. I reached out across the space between us, fingertips brushing his arm. His eyelids fluttered once, twice, our quiet language telling me, I'm here, I'm fighting. Inside the hospital, everything became chaos, beeping monitors, stretchers rolling fast, nurses calling codes in clipped voices. The pain swallowed me whole, but I forced myself to keep my eyes half closed. Just enough to listen. When people believe you're unconscious, they tell the truth. She said they slipped taking a photo. A nurse murmured outside the curtain. 2 people slipping the same way on a clear trail. Another voice replied, doesn't add up. I memorized their skepticism. In a fight like mine, allies mattered more than air. Hours blurred until a new presence filled the room, a nurse named Imani with steady hands and eyes sharp as glass. She leaned over me, pretending to adjust my Roman 4, then so low I almost missed it. She asked, if you can hear me, blink twice. I blinked, her eyes widened. If those people who brought you here are a danger to you, blink 3 times. 3 blinks, her jaw set like stone. I had just placed my life in her hands. By the next morning, an officer stood stationed outside my door. Not long after, a tall man in rolled-up sleeves walked in, notepad in hand. His voice was calm, the kind you trust because it doesn't need to shout. Mrs. Ellison, I'm Detective Rowan Hale. Nurse Imani believes you have something you want to share. I glanced at the machine by my bed, its beep steady. My throat burned when I tried to speak, but the words scraped out anyway. I have recordings. Rowan froze, then leaned closer. Recordings, kitchen camera, I whispered. Thomas's phone on the trail, and a video will. My lips trembled. Everything they said, everything they planned. His pen stopped mid-word. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Hope. Mrs. Ellison, if that's true, you may have just saved your own life. Later that day, my attorney walked in, a woman named Nell Bishop, sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of person who made rooms quieter just by stepping into them. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Helen, I'm going to ask you something hard. Are you prepared to testify against your own son? The question stabbed deeper than my injuries. My heart ached for the boy I once held. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. But I thought of Caleb, I thought of the gorge 25 years ago, and I thought of the shove that nearly ended me. I loved the child he was, I said, voice steady despite the tears burning behind my eyes. But I won't let the man he became write my ending. Nell's expression softened for just a moment. Then we'll fight, with facts, with paper, with truth. As the hours passed, the evidence began stacking higher. Rowan's team pulled files from Jude's accounts, loans unpaid, checks forged, documents tampered with. One stood out like a knife in the light. An altered life insurance rider, my signature traced but not mine. I felt sick. All those nights I thought Jude was visiting to check on us. He had really been cataloging what our lives were worth. But the most damning piece came from my own home, the hidden kitchen camera. On the grainy footage, Raina's voice was crystal clear. It has to look natural. And Jude's reply, one nudge, gravity writes the story. That night, Thomas finally opened his eyes. His voice was weak but steady as he whispered, did they believe us? I squeezed his hand. They will, we have proof. And for the first time since the fall, I let myself imagine something more than survival, justice. But justice comes with a price. Rowan warned us the next morning, your son owes more than money. He owes people who don't forgive debts. Without your inheritance, he doesn't just lose comfort, he loses his life. That truth chilled me deeper than the mountain air ever had. Jude hadn't just betrayed us for greed, he'd betrayed us out of desperation, which meant he wasn't done, and neither was I. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of machines. Thomas drifted in and out of sleep, his hand warm in mine. Outside, fall leaves rattled against the window, the sound like whispers too old to ignore. Detective Rowan returned that morning, his coat still damp from the rain. He carried a folder so thick it looked like it could crush the table he dropped it on. We ran deeper checks, he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. Your son Jude has been juggling loans with predatory lenders for years. He's drowning, Mrs. Ellison, and men like him don't just sink, they grab anyone near them to stay afloat. The words carved straight through me. For weeks I had blamed greed alone, but Rowan was right, this wasn't just about money. It was about survival twisted into something monstrous. Then Rowan paused, his voice softer, almost reluctant. And there's more, something that ties back to 25 years ago. Caleb, my chest tightened. What about my boy? Rowan opened another file, this one thinner but heavier in weight. Photographs, old witness reports, an autopsy summary yellowed with time. We pulled the original case file on your son Caleb's death, he said. Back then, the ruling was accidental, slip and fall at the gorge, but there are discrepancies. A neighbor claimed he heard shouting that night. Another saw 2 figures by the ridge. Those reports were dismissed as unreliable. My breath caught, my hands shook so violently I had to grip the rails of the hospital bed. Rowan's eyes met mine. "Mrs. Ellison, I believe Caleb didn't fall, I believe he was pushed." The room tilted. I heard the beeping machine quicken beside me, nurses rushing. Their voices blurring, but I waved them off. I needed to hear this. I had waited 25 years for this. When they left, Rowan continued. "Your husband mentioned something, didn't he, that he saw Jude near the gorge the night Caleb died?" Thomas stirred in his bed, his voice raspy but clear. "I saw them, Caleb waving papers in Jude's face, shouting, and then his throat caught, words breaking into silence." I touched his arm gently. "Finish it, Thomas. We can't bury the truth anymore." Tears gathered in his eyes, and then Jude shoved him hard. Caleb lost his footing. I froze. By the time I reached the edge, my boy was already gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. For years, Thomas had carried that truth like a hidden stone in his chest. For years, I had blamed fate instead of the sun standing in my own kitchen. My voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I couldn't lose both sons in one night." He whispered, "I thought if I protected Jude, maybe he'd change." But Jude hadn't changed. He had only grown sharper, colder, hungrier. Detective Rowan slid another piece of paper across the table. A bank ledger. My stomach dropped as I scanned the number. Withdrawals, transfers, signatures. These records, Rowan explained, showed Jude had been siphoning money from your accounts even before Caleb died. Caleb found out. He confronted him. That confrontation is what killed him. I pressed my hand to my mouth, a sob tearing through me. My beautiful Caleb, the son who used to carry groceries for neighbors, who dreamed of building bridges as an engineer. His life had been ended not by bad luck but by betrayal, wearing the face of his brother. And for 25 years I had set a place for his killer at my table. That evening, Attorney Nell Bishop returned with another update. She sat by my bed, her notebook balanced on one knee. "The district attorney is prepared to reopen Caleb's case," she said. "But here's the hard part. Your testimony, Thomas's confession, and the financial trail may not be enough without more direct evidence. We need a confession from Jude or Raina, something airtight." Her eyes narrowed, and judging by what we've already seen, they're arrogant enough to give it. I thought of their whispers on the cliff, of Jude's words dripping with contempt. It's ours now. Arrogance, yes, but arrogance could be turned into a weapon. That night, as the hospital settled into silence, I stared at the ceiling tiles and thought of Caleb. I remembered him at 16, arms greasy from helping Thomas fix the truck, grinning as he said, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a house by the ocean. You deserve waves instead of walls." I remembered him at 19, books spread across the oak table, promising he'd take care of us when we were old. Promises he never got the chance to keep. But maybe, just maybe, I could still keep a promise for him, to fight for truth, to fight for justice, even if it meant burning what was left of my relationship with the son who remained. The next morning, Rowan returned with a plan. "We're going to set a trap," he said, his voice low, steady. "Jude and Raina think you're weaker than you are. They think you don't know half of what you know. That's our advantage. We'll use it." My fingers curled into the sheets. What kind of trap? Rowan's expression hardened. "The kind that makes liars trip over their own lies." And in that moment, I realized something. For 25 years, I had played the quiet mother, the one who cooked, who taught, who forgave, the one who kept peace at any cost. But that woman had fallen off the cliff. The one who survived was someone else. By the time the leaves outside the hospital had turned copper and gold, I no longer felt like a patient. I felt like bait. Detective Rowan had been clear. If we want to bring Jude and Raina down, we need them to hang themselves with their own words. We'll give them the rope, they'll do the rest. It sounded simple in theory, but the reality was that rope was tied to me, to my heart, to my voice. Nell Bishop, my attorney, came to see me the night before. She wore her determination like armor, her pen clicking like a metronome of control. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll invite Jude and Raina back to the hospital. They believe you're weak. They believe you're still half dead. You're going to play that part long enough to get them talking." I swallowed hard. "And if they don't?" Nell leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Then you push, subtly, mention the will, mention Caleb. Let their fear and arrogance do the rest. They've been rehearsing their innocence, Helen. But rehearsed stories crack when the stage lights burn hot enough." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. For 62 years I'd been a mother, a teacher, a wife. Tomorrow I had to be something else, the one who forced her own child to reveal the monster he'd become. The next morning the hospital felt colder. Rowan's officers disguised themselves as staff, one in a nurse's uniform, another pushing a supply cart. Imani. The nurse who had first believed me stood at the door, her presence a quiet promise. I won't let them touch you again. When Jude and Raina arrived, their performance began the second their shoes hit the tile. Jude's shoulders slumped in practiced grief. Raina carried a bouquet of lilies, the kind you bring to funerals, not hospital rooms. My poor mom, Jude murmured, squeezing my hand like he hadn't shoved me toward death days earlier. You look so fragile. Fragile, the word slid off his tongue like a knife disguised as silk. Raina sat on the other side of the bed, her smile painted on. We just want what's best for you, Helen. We've been so worried. And with everything going on, the house, the will, there's so much to think about. We want to make sure you don't have to carry those burdens. There it was, barely 10 minutes in, and already they had stepped into the conversation Nell predicted. I played my part, letting my voice wobble. The will, I whispered, eyes half-lidded. Yes, I've been thinking about Caleb, about what he would have wanted. Silence. Thick, heavy, Jude's hand froze on mine. Raina laughed lightly, too quickly. Oh, Helen, don't exhaust yourself with old memories. Caleb would only want you happy. Isn't that right, Jude? Jude's jaw flexed, his smile cracking like old plaster, and then it came, the first fissure in his mask. Caleb isn't here, is he? His tone was sharp, almost bitter. I'm the one still here. I'm the one who deserves it. Rowan's hidden recorder caught every word. I kept my breathing steady, though my heart thudded like a drum in my chest. I tilted my head, feigning weakness. Deserve what, Jude? He blinked, realizing he'd gone too far. Deserve your trust, Mom. Deserve to take care of things for you. But Raina, God bless her arrogance, couldn't keep her mouth shut. She leaned closer, her whisper dripping with contempt. If you just signed everything over sooner, none of this would have been necessary. The words hung in the sterile air. Necessary. Detective Rowan's eyes flicked from behind the nurse's station. The trap was tightening. I pressed harder. Necessary, Raina, what do you mean by that? Her lips parted, but Jude's hand shot out, gripping her wrist under the table. His smile returned, jagged and frantic. She means it's necessary that you feel safe, that you trust us, we're family. But the damage was done, the crack had widened. After they left, Rowan came into the room, recorder in hand. He didn't smile, but his eyes gleamed. They're unraveling, that word necessary paired with Jude's slip about Caleb, it's enough to move forward. I sat back against the pillows, my body trembling with exhaustion, but under the fear, under the grief, something new stirred inside me. Power. For decades I had carried guilt, doubt, silence. But now, for the first time, I had the truth. And truth was heavier than lies, heavy enough to tip the scales. That night, Thomas reached for my hand in the dim glow of the hospital monitors. His voice was faint but steady. You were brilliant, Helen, stronger than I've ever seen you. Tears pricked my eye. I don't feel strong, I feel broken. He squeezed my hand. Even broken bones heal stronger where they were once weak. But even as I clung to his words, I knew the fight wasn't over. Because the next step wasn't just exposing Jude's lies. It was walking into the courtroom, into the public eye, and watching my son fight to bury me a second time, this time with words instead of stone. And I would have to be ready. The courthouse smelled of old wood and colder memories. I'd always imagined justice as something shining like sunlight through stained glass. But in that room it felt heavier, like a stone pressing against my chest. Thomas sat beside me in his wheelchair, his hands trembling in his lap. The scars across his face and ribs told a story the court didn't need words to hear. He was living evidence. Detective Rowan nodded to us from across the aisle. Attorney Nell Bishop shuffled papers at the prosecution's table, every page a blade honed for battle. And then they brought Jude in. My son. He wore a suit, but it didn't fit him, not in the way clothes don't fit a body, but in the way masks never fit the truth. His hair was slicked back, his eyes cast low, a portrait of a grieving son painted by a liar's brush. Raina followed, her black dress dramatic enough to win sympathy from strangers. She clutched a handkerchief she didn't need. When her eyes met mine, they were dry, sharp, unrepentant. The judge's gavel cracked the room open. This court is now in session. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the state will prove beyond doubt that Jude Ellison and his wife Raina conspired to murder his parents in order to seize their assets. And in doing so, we will also reopen the truth behind the death of his brother, Caleb Ellison, 25 years ago. A ripple moved through the gallery, neighbors, old friends, reporters scribbling headlines. Caleb's name had returned, not as a fading memory, but as a shadow demanding light. Nell leaned toward me, her voice low. Helen, you'll take the stand tomorrow. Today we listen. And listen I did. They played the recordings first, grainy audio of Jude's voice on the mountain, low but lethal. It's ours now. One nudge. Gravity writes the story. The jury shifted in their seats. Some stared at Jude with open disgust. Then came Raina's whisper, captured by Thomas's hidden phone. If you just signed everything over sooner, none of this would have been necessary. Raina's face tightened, her knuckles white around her useless handkerchief. But it was when Rowan presented the bank ledgers that the air turned heavier. "Members of the jury," he said, holding up the papers, "this is not the story of desperate children caring for aging parents. This is the story of theft, forgery, and calculated murder." Caleb Ellison confronted his brother about these discrepancies 25 years ago. Hours later, he was dead at the bottom of a gorge. The courtroom went silent. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, because truth didn't need noise, it needed endurance. When the day ended, I wheeled Thomas back to the car. Paparazzi lights flashed like lightning. Questions hurled through the air. "Mrs. Ellison, do you believe your son is guilty? Do you think Caleb's death was murder? Do you feel safe knowing Jude is in the same building as you?" I didn't answer, not yet. My words belonged to the witness stand. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling of the hotel room felt like another courtroom, watching, waiting. I thought of Jude as a boy bringing me wildflowers from the yard. I thought of Caleb laughing as he taught his little brother how to fish. Where had it gone wrong? How had love curdled into this? Thomas's voice broke the silence. "Helen, tomorrow when you speak, don't carry me or Caleb with guilt. Carry us with truth. That's the only way we win." I nodded, tears sliding silently across my cheeks. He was right. Justice wasn't about vengeance. It was about setting down a weight that had broken us for too long. The next morning, my name was called. I walked slowly to the stand, every step heavy with the eyes of strangers. When I raised my hand and swore to tell the truth, my voice didn't tremble, not anymore. Nell's first question was simple. "Mrs. Ellison, can you tell the jury what happened on the mountain 3 weeks ago?" I inhaled, steady. "Yes, my son pushed me." Gasps rippled through the room, but I wasn't finished. "And it wasn't the first time he destroyed a life in this family. 25 years ago, he killed his brother Caleb." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Jude's head shot up, his mask cracking for everyone to see. When I swore the oath and settled into the witness chair, the courtroom shrank and widened all at once. The 12 jurors stared at me like open notebooks waiting to be written in. Cameras flashed in the gallery. Neighbors and strangers leaned forward as though my words might explain every whisper they'd carried for decades. But none of them mattered in that moment. What mattered was Caleb and Thomas, and the weight of 25 years of silence pressing against my ribs. Nell Bishop stood at the prosecutor's table, her gaze steady. "Mrs. Ellison, please tell the court, in your own words, what happened the day of your anniversary hike." I folded my hands in my lap. My wedding ring glinted under the harsh lights. I had worn that ring through 40 years of joy and storms, but never a storm like this. My husband and I were invited by our son Jude and his wife Raina to go hiking. I began. They said it was a celebration. A gift, we trusted them. My voice caught, but I pressed forward. At the cliff, Raina told us to step back for a photo. Jude was behind us, and then I swallowed hard. And then we were shoved. A murmur rippled through the jury box. They wanted it to look like an accident. They told each other as much when they thought we were gone. They spoke of debts, of inheritance, of plans, but I wasn't gone. I was still alive. I heard every word. The prosecutor nodded. "Do you recognize the voices recorded on this device?" He held up Thomas's phone. I met Jude's eyes across the courtroom, eyes I had once searched for fevers, for truth, for love. Now I saw only darkness. "Yes," I said firmly. "Those voices belong to my son and his wife." Nell let the silence settle before stepping closer. "Mrs. Ellison, you've spoken of recent events, but the state also wishes to ask about something further back, your firstborn son. Caleb, would you tell the jury what you know?" A tremor ran through me. 25 years of pain surged at once, but I steadied myself. Caleb was light. He was kind, hardworking, protective. He dreamed of building bridges, literal ones. He used to say he wanted to connect places, connect people. But one night, when he was 20, he never came home. My throat tightened. They said it was an accident, that he stumbled into the gorge, but it wasn't. Jude shifted violently at the defense table, his attorney's hand shooting out to still him. On the night Caleb died, I continued. Thomas saw Jude and Caleb arguing. Caleb had found proof that Jude was stealing money from our accounts. Jude was furious, and then Caleb went over the edge. The words hung in the air like a noose. Nell's voice was steady. "Mrs. Ellison, who pushed him?" I looked straight at my son. "Jude did." Gasps filled the room. A reporter dropped her pen. Raina's hand clamped over her mouth, her mask finally cracking into something closer to fear. "Objection." Jude's lawyer shouted, leaping to his feet. "Speculation, hearsay." The judge's gavel struck once, sharp. "Overruled. The witness may continue." I leaned forward, my voice low but clear. For 25 years I told myself I still had one son left, but the truth is I lost both that night. Caleb to the gorge, Jude to the darkness inside him. The silence was unbearable, even the air seemed to ache. Nell stepped back. No further questions. Then came the cross-examination. Jude's lawyer, slick-haired and silver-tongued, circled me like a predator. "Mrs. Ellison, you admit you were injured, disoriented, and under extreme trauma the day of the hike. Isn't it possible your memory is unreliable?" I met his gaze without flinching. Trauma doesn't blur betrayal, it sharpens it. He smirked. "And this story about Caleb 25 years later, convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" I turned toward the jury. "Not him, convenient, no, necessary. The truth doesn't expire just because it's buried." The jurors leaned in, scribbling notes. The lawyer's smile faltered. Then it happened. Jude shot to his feet, his voice erupting like a storm. "She's lying. She always loved Caleb more. He got everything, and I," his lawyer yanked at his sleeve, but it was too late. "I did what I had to do." The courtroom gasped as the words echoed off the walls. The judge slammed the gavel. "Mr. Ellison, sit down." But the damage was already done. The mask had shattered. As officers forced Jude back into his chair, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Relief, not joy, not triumph, but the release of a truth too heavy to carry anymore. Thomas reached for my hand from his wheelchair, his grip frail but certain. His whisper reached only me. "You did it, Helen. You freed him from his lies, and you freed us." But trials are not finished with a single outburst. There were still witnesses to hear, verdicts to weigh, justice to seal. And the closer we came to the end, the more I feared what it would cost, not just for me, but for the children Jude and Raina had left behind. Because when blood betrays blood, the wounds don't stop at one generation. The final days of the trial felt longer than the 25 years of silence that led us here. Every morning I walked into that courtroom, my cane clicking against the polished floor, the weight of dozens of eyes pressing down. Reporters whispered, neighbors craned their necks, and jurors scribbled notes like archaeologists piecing together the ruins of my family. Thomas was wheeled in beside me each day, his injuries still raw but his resolve steady. He told me once, "If we can survive the fall, Helen, we can survive the truth." But survival felt less certain as the trial wound toward its end. The prosecution brought in expert after expert, financial analysts confirming Jude's theft, handwriting specialists proving forged signatures, mountaineering experts explaining how the cliff was chosen for maximum accident potential. Each fact was another nail, hammered steadily into the coffin of Jude's defense. The defense tried to paint another picture, Jude as desperate, pressured, a man who cracked under financial strain. Raina as a loyal wife misled by her husband. But the jury had seen the recording. They had heard Jude's outburst. They had watched Raina's mask slip when she whispered that word necessary. No lawyer could repaint that canvas. When closing arguments ended, the jury was dismissed to deliberate. I expected hours, maybe days. They returned in 4 hours. Courtroom froze as the foreman rose, verdict slipped trembling in his hands. On the charge of first-degree attempted murder of Helen Ellison, we find the defendant, Jude Ellison, guilty. The word slammed through the air like a church bell. On the charge of first-degree attempted murder of Thomas Ellison, guilty. My chest tightened. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Caleb Ellison 25 years ago, guilty. I covered my mouth. Tears blurred my vision. But for the first time in decades, Caleb's name was not a whisper in the dark. It was truth spoken loud enough for the world to hear. And the defendant, Raina Ellison, guilty as an accomplice on all counts. Gasps rippled through the room. Raina dropped her handkerchief, the mask finally falling with it. Jude stood stiff, jaw clenched, eyes burning with something beyond rage, something emptier. The judge's voice was firm, final. Both defendants are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A sound escaped me, not joy, not relief, but something closer to release. Like an old wound finally stitched shut, though the scar would remain forever. Beside me, Thomas closed his eyes, whispering one name, Caleb, but the gavel's echo wasn't the end, because when family collapses in court, it doesn't stop at the guilty. It ripples outward. 2 children sat with social workers in the back row, my grandchildren. Jude and Raina's innocent children. Too young to understand words like verdict or sentence. When the judge left the bench, their cries filled the emptying courtroom. Where's mommy? Where's daddy? The sound gutted me deeper than any testimony. That night, Rowan and Nell sat with me in a small conference room. The overhead light buzzed, the air thick with decisions heavier than any verdict. Rowan folded his hands. Social services will take temporary custody of the children. But Helen, you and Thomas, you have the legal right to apply for guardianship. My breath caught. Guardianship. Thomas squeezed my hand. His voice was frail but steady. They're all we have left, Helen, and we're all they have left too. But the thought of raising the children of the very people who tried to murder me twisted inside my chest. Would they carry Jude's darkness? Would they grow to hate me for the bars around their parents? I closed my eyes. I saw Caleb at 16, holding his little brother's hand. I saw the innocence that existed before bitterness took root, and I remembered something Caleb once said to me on the porch. Mom, kids don't choose the soil they're planted in, but they can still grow toward the light if someone gives them the chance. My decision was clear. The next morning I walked into the children's foster center. They ran to me, small arms clinging to my waist. Their voices trembled. Grandma, are you taking us home? I bent down, holding them tight, tears running unchecked. Yes, I whispered, home where you'll be safe, where love is real. And for the first time since the fall I felt not broken but whole. Yet even as I held them I knew this story wasn't finished. Because healing doesn't come from verdicts alone. Healing comes from what we choose to do with the broken pieces left behind. When the trial ended, the headlines screamed betrayal, justice, and tragedy. Neighbors whispered in grocery store aisles. Church friends pressed my hand with sympathy, and strangers mailed letters that began with I can't imagine. But life is not lived in headlines. Life is lived in the quiet spaces that come after the kitchen table, the bedtime stories, the mornings when coffee drips while children stir awake in the next room. That's where our healing began. Thomas and I brought our grandchildren home on a soft autumn evening. The house felt different when their laughter echoed down the hallways. The same walls that once carried arguments and secrets now rang with the sound of children chasing each other past the oak table Thomas carved years ago. At night when I tucked them into bed, they asked questions their small voices could barely hold. Why can't we see Mommy and Daddy? I held them close. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, and when they do, they have to face the consequences. But none of this is your fault. Their eyes searched mine for truth. I gave it to them as gently as I could. You are loved, you are safe, and you will never be alone. In the weeks that followed, Thomas and I found ourselves living not as victims, not as broken survivors, but as parents again. Older, slower, but with hearts made stronger by every scar. We planted a garden out back. The children helped us bury seeds, their small hands pressing dirt into earth. I told them each seed carried a promise that even after the hardest winter, something new can grow. They smiled, not yet fully understanding, but one day they would. I still visit Caleb's grave. I bring the children with me and I tell them about their uncle, the way he laughed, the way he dreamed, the way he always looked out for the people he loved. I want them to know him not as a victim, but as a man who once filled this family with light. And sometimes when the wind stirs through the trees, I imagine Caleb's voice reminding me of what he once said. Kids don't choose the soil they're planted in, but they can still grow toward the light. Now I believe him more than ever. There are still nights when I wake from dreams of falling, branches scraping, rocks spinning, the taste of blood in my mouth. But when I open my eyes, I see Thomas beside me. Breathing slow and steady, I hear the children's soft voices down the hall, and I know I didn't fall to die, I fell to rise again. So here is what I've learned, what I hope you take with you. Betrayal can come from the people closest to you. It can break you in ways you never thought possible. But betrayal does not get the last word. Truth does, love does, and healing always finds a way if you let it. 1 year after the trial, on a warm spring afternoon, Thomas and I stood in the yard while the children played tag around the old oak tree. Their laughter rose into the sky like a hymn, washing the house clean of shadows. I looked at Thomas, his cane leaning against the porch rail, and I whispered, "We didn't lose everything, did we?" He smiled, lines deepening on his weathered face. "No, Helen, we found what mattered most. The house that once carried secrets now carries second chances." And every time I hear the children's laughter fill its rooms, I know that even after betrayal, even after the deepest fall, there is still a way forward. Not perfect, not painless, but possible, and that is enough. Justice was served, but scars remain. I'm still healing, not just from broken bones, but from the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any fall. Yet every morning I hear my grandchildren laughing in the yard, and I know love is still stronger than blood that betrays. I've learned this: we don't choose the storms that hit us, but we can choose what to plant in the ruins afterward. What about you? If life tore your family apart, would you have the strength to rebuild? Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and share this story, because sometimes the hardest truths carry the brightest lessons.